He basically was like, get out of your heads, start doing things, and make it happen. And it feels great.
Wyron Robinson, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks. How's it going?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on my show. I'm very excited to talk to you about mobility, transportation. You were the VP Global at Gett Taxi, Israeli-based unicorn that is a hugely popular ride-sharing service. But before that, you were also very involved with Waze and Move It. Now, most recently, the Chief Operations Officer of Nemodata. But your journey is a little bit weird. It wasn't obvious that you're going to end up being the COO of a growing startup or the VP at a unicorn. You actually started back in Duke and politics. So talk to me a little bit about that. And I'd love to tie in your fun fact of being a certified yoga instructor.
Yeah, so lots of different elements
A
and
lot.
all coming together. So yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and share a little bit about my journey. So you're right. I started back studying politics and economics back at Duke many years ago. Um, and I thought that I wanted to be a diplomat. That was my kind of first career. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And then at some point, I realized that being a diplomat meant working for the government, which wasn't suited so well to my personality. And I decided to look for other opportunities or ways to go abroad. Um, and kind of reached out to some people at Duke, ended up working in Latin America for about 4 years.
How do you
And then
get to
eventually,
Latin America? It's not the most obvious path from Israel to Duke to Latin America.
yeah, so I went there initially to study abroad. I had the choice between Spain or Bolivia, and I chose Bolivia, kind of the less traveled path. Um, and after spending some time there, I got connected with some alumni from my university just to ask them. I was really curious, kind of, what are you doing here? How are you doing it? And so from those conversations, it ended up turning into a role for me, and it grew from there. So after a couple of years, I decided that I wanted to continue growing in my career and do my MBA. But there was a dissonance between going from Latin America back to the US to do an MBA there. So enter Israel. During that time, I visited Israel for the first time, and Startup Nation, everything exciting that's going on here. And so I decided to come to Israel to do my MBA 10 years ago. And you could say the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
So that history is still very, very long because you've been an MBA consultant for Waze and then you worked for Move It and Get Taxi. Why mobility? What is it about mobility that really got you excited?
Yeah. So during my MBA, we had a project where we reached out to an Israeli startup and basically had to pitch ourselves to do a project during our studies. And so my teammates and I pitched ourselves to Waze, wrote an email to Uri Levine. Hi, Uri. We would love to work for you with you on any project that you need. And to our delight, he replied, sure. And
As simple as
that's how
that.
it got started. As simple as that, just kind of, shooting for what you want. And sometimes you surprise yourself. So anyway, Uri became an amazing mentor. And I think it's really through him that, first of all, that I fell in love with startups and decided to stay in Israel, not only do my MBA here, and also he taught me the difference between managing and building. And when you go to your MBA, a lot of it is about managing. How do you
Right.
manage your P&L? How do you control versus
What
building
is the
something new?
difference?
Yeah, so I think in startups, especially in the world, again, you asked about mobility. Why do I like it? Why am I into it? Because it's changing, because it's growing. It's not managing something that exists. It's building something that you are imagining for the future. and taking all of the micro steps now to make this macro vision a reality. This is something I think that he really encouraged us to do. He basically was like, get out of your heads, start doing things, and make it happen. And it feels great. So yeah, so this is how I got into startups, into mobility. And through Ori, I met the founders at Move It. And yeah,
So
and
even within mobility, what's been your sweet spot? What has been the area that you've been really focusing on?
yeah. So I would say there's kind of two aspects to what really gets me excited. One is, like I mentioned, building from scratch to scale. So having this kind of zoom in, zoom out approach of, okay, what's the macro vision? What's our North Star? Where are we aiming for? And then kind of reverse engineering all of the little steps that need to be executed on to get there. Um, so it's not enough to have only the vision. You have to be able to execute on it, and you have to be able to engage people around it. So I'd say this
Mhm.
kind of building from scratch to scale is something that, if I think of the moments that were like most exciting or most, when I was in my state of flow, it's these moments. And I think the other piece of it is partnerships. So a lot of my career has focused on partnering with others to create value, both within the organization, other organizations, and kind of trying to figure out how we can get there together, because we're not going to get there alone.
Right,
So
but still, it sounds to me that the things that you were mentioning, the zoom in, zoom out, scale partnerships, that is something that is pretty common to across the board when you're looking at the tech sector, right? No matter really what industry you're in, you're going to be dependent on and reliant on good partnerships and on great scale and growth on any SaaS business. So still, why mobility? Why helping people get from point A to point B? Because I can imagine you now going to Slack or Twitter or Google and saying, okay, we can do the same thing there.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's something really special about mobility. I love it, obviously. There's something about the fact that it affects your daily life. Someone mentioned, that a good app should be like a toothbrush. You use it twice a day. And so I think mobility, it's something that really affects our lives and affects our quality of our lives when it comes to your commute, how much time you're spending getting where you're going. These days, these COVID days, it's a bit different. So how is it changing? How is it evolving? But I think that we're seeing these dramatic shifts in something that affects people's daily lives.
Hmm,
Really significant way. I mean, hours and hours of every day are spent moving
of
around.
course.
I really get excited about things that can really impact
So having
in a good
having
way.
seen a lot of the different innovations that have been going on over the past few years in the space, where are we heading? Because it feels to me as more of a bystander that we have these great tech companies that are developing these great technologies to link drivers and riders, even link riders and riders. But we've reached some point of we've reached some milestone where okay, it's easy for me to get a taxi no matter what. But I haven't seen really major advancements in the past 2 3 years. Are there big advancements to look forward to in the mobility space?
Sure. So I think there's kind of two areas that are exciting to me around mobility. One is, I mean, you mentioned there's lots of different private companies working individually, and I'll go back to my public policy and also my partnerships kind of vision to say there's an ecosystem that is yet to be created where these systems are working together and where it's not, there's a place for the city to be involved there and kind of what's for the public good,
Right.
uh, not only individual companies with individual riders, but starting to look at the city as a whole. There's this whole concept of the 15-minute city that I think is really interesting and really exciting,
What is
where
the
you can
concept of the 15-minute city?
yeah,
I
where
don't
you
know
can get
that.
anywhere in 15 minutes. That's what makes a good city, according to this theory. So it means having goods and services close to you, and it means having accessible transportation to get where you need to go. So I think it would be great to get anywhere in 15 minutes. And so I think this is one area that we're going to see more developments that actually help people in their lives. And I think the second area is around, and this is something that's really exciting to me, thinking about Nemodata, is this area of artificial intelligence. So starting to see not only how we have the operations side of these mobility services that are, doing a good job today of offering rides or offering scooters or whatever the case may be, but then starting to have this artificial intelligence that's actually optimizing things on a level beyond. And so I think that's something that's really exciting, and there's a
So,
lot
so
to be
even
explored there.
before even before we talk about what Nemodata actually does, what is the problem that you're describing here? That you're saying on one hand we have the operations, and we're getting pretty good at them and matching and doing all the logistical stuff. What is that layer that we're missing that you think?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, and again, it can be from everything from scooters to logistics, but there's so much data that's being generated. So much data. And I'm not talking about, Michael wakes up here and goes here. I'm not talking about this unique data. I'm talking about aggregated kind of on a macro level. There's so much
Right,
data being generated. And it's almost like a tsunami that then, it takes, I think the next phase is to say, okay, what data do we actually need and how
right.
can we use it to actually bring insights that improve things. And so I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, this is where artificial intelligence can help us see through the noise or cut through the noise and come up with really smart, actionable things to do to actually take improvements. So it becomes beyond just moving from point A to point B as an individual, and it becomes, okay, how do we optimize the whole system,
Right,
kind of from
right.
a macro level?
So Nemodata is trying to work on that problem, but and how do you do that? So how do you approach this new market with this new understanding that a bunch of this data also, I mean, you're coming from a world of partnerships, you need to acquire the data from these partners.
Sure, sure. So Nemo is looking at preventive maintenance, so preventing breakdowns for fleets and before they actually happen.
Right.
So we see a tremendous opportunity, both in terms of commercial vehicles like Class 8 trucks that break down. They break down a lot, and it costs a lot, both in the expense of fixing it and also the revenue that's being missed when those trucks aren't working. We see shifts to electric vehicles. We see shifts to autonomous vehicles. So all these really interesting things that are happening with fleets. And then somebody's got to prevent them from actually breaking down, and make sure that those fleets are actually running, and that they're on the road. And I don't know about you, I wouldn't want to be in an autonomous vehicle that just stops working and there's no driver
Probably
to
not.
tell me. No, no, there's no driver to keep an eye on things. It really needs to be. It really needs to be through artificial intelligence. And also with electric vehicles, nobody's run these vehicles constantly, 24 hours a day. Commercial vehicles have all kinds of stresses on them that we don't know yet. So there's a huge place for artificial intelligence to help us take all the sensors, pull the data in, compute it, and come up with some actionable insights there.
I think what you're saying is fascinating because I've never even thought of this. When I think of moving to autonomous vehicles, right? It's the imminent future that is hopefully not too far away. I'm thinking of myself being in a car, and I'm not even worried that the car will do an accident because I trust the autonomous vehicle more than I trust myself, and I'm a pretty good driver, and I still trust the autonomous vehicle much more than I trust myself. But obviously, any machinery, anything that has moving pieces, let alone electricity running through it, is going to break down at some point. So even if that autonomous vehicle breaks down once every 5 years, right, that's still a scary thought. And I would want something to be able to tell me, to tell the company operating it, by the way, we think in the next few weeks you might want to check on a few things here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's definitely a place for artificial intelligence to do the things in the background that we as consumers or drivers take for granted. From your perspective, the vehicle should show up and it should work, and everything that has to do with preventing issues should be happening in
A
the
hundred,
background.
100%, and I'm guessing that until these solutions come to place, the obvious solution is going to have to be regular checkups, regular maintenances. I believe that when I spoke to Gal from Nemodata, he shared with me these astonishing facts about truck breakdowns across the United States and how much money is being wasted daily, monthly, annually on truck breakdowns that could be prevented if you would just have those sensors that are that are predicting when it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely major applications for this today. The figures we've seen are that there's $85 billion wasted every year just in
Unbelievable.
the on truck breakdowns that could be prevented, both in, again, those direct costs and the lost revenue from the vehicle not working. And that actually those same vehicles are responsible for 5% of the US greenhouse gas emissions,
Wow.
which is an insane amount. And it doesn't have
Unbelievable.
to be that. You can also reduce the emissions by keeping the vehicle in top form, by changing the parts on time, by making sure that the tires
Right.
have the right air pressure. This kind of stuff affects fuel
100%.
consumption in a crazy way. So
100%.
we'll see
Amy,
huge
uh,
impacts.
it's fascinating to talk about mobility, but even more than that, I love hearing your insights along the way. So, having gone through these experiences, and now I feel that I've gained a little bit more insight into the mobility space and some of the thinking process that you go through throughout the years. But what are some things that, if you were to look back, you were to tell your younger self, even whether it's at a point in Duke or at the MBA with Waze or Move It, what things would you tell yourself?
Um, yeah, yes. So I think I've had definitely a journey with myself over the last, you know, 10, 15 years of kind of coming into myself as a leader. I think that I'm not usually the oldest person in the room. I'm sometimes the only woman in the room. I'm definitely not the loudest one in the room. And so it took me a while to start to understand that what makes me different is actually my superpowers, and that it's not weaknesses. um, and to own that. I mean, I think I remember so clearly during my MBA, I studied with Israelis, and I was in this group of the Israeli guys who'd been in the military. They have their kind of leadership style, and I remember the teacher gave us this assignment. We had like 15 minutes to work on it, and so I read the assignment. And I said to everyone, okay, what do you think? And what do you think? And what's your input? And tried to kind of keep us on time, build consensus. And we got to the end of the 15 minutes. And then the teacher says, okay, so who's the leader to present? And I turned to the group and I said, who's the leader? And they said to me, you're the leader. And something went off in my mind that, yeah, I'm the leader. I'm not just the helper or the facilitator or the supporter. I'm by engaging everyone, by getting that consensus and bringing everyone in, I'm the leader. And so kind of went home that day and said, I'm the leader. Joking, but
Amazing.
it really, it was a journey for me to understand my style and learn how to use it, and learn how to use it as a superpower. So.
And what I love about the story is that while you're explaining the environment that where you were bring together the consensus, you didn't even mention if you even said your opinion. And I think that that's one of the remarkable aspects of leadership, that it doesn't even necessarily to have the person who speaks the loudest or is the first to say their opinion, but the person who is also able to get the consensus and hear everybody and then adapt even their own views after hearing everybody and putting it all together. I think that's just wonderful. Amy, I can't believe 20 minutes are almost up. I really enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being on the show. Best of luck with Nemodata and what you're doing there. I think it's just phenomenal, and I'm very hopeful that by the time that autonomous vehicles will be here, when I'll be in the vehicle, I'll know that it's being powered by the preventive analysis of Nemodata. But before we leave, Amy, I need to ask you for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Sure. So I think calm under pressure is
Okay.
definitely one. Um, Collaborative. I love working with people, bringing people together, and getting where we're going together. And curious. I love learning new things, and I try to approach even the hardest things with curiosity, with kind of a question of, what is it going to feel like when when we do this amazing thing? So yeah.
And I'm sure it's pretty exciting moving from a big company like Gett all of a sudden to a small early stage startup that is just getting started properly, and being in that core team. I'm sure it's incredible.
Never boring.
Never boring. Amy, thank you very much. תודה רבה. Best of
Thank
luck.
you.
Dash to Gal, and I can't wait to see powered by Nemodata on all the vehicles.
Yeah, yeah. Think of us when
Take care.
bye.